The world is separated very clearly into two different castes of people. We call it people who get it and people who don't. And it's really that simple for your staff. The staff that cares, they care because of it. You can see how they treat each other and how they treat people that they have relationships with. They're going to bring that with them, whether they're working or whether they're out playing at the beach.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rishi Katz, and welcome to The Oval Table, where we discuss all things related to helping those who live and work within your business how to survive, thrive, avoid pitfalls, have more fun, and become successful faster. Getting advice and input from someone outside of your business can make a big difference, and that's what we seek to do for you each and every week. Here at The Oval Table, we believe that every voice matters, and we want to model how that works. Often the advice that makes the difference comes from where you least expect it. We seek every week to provide a lens for a different way to do business. So much more is possible when everyone's ideas make it to the table. Let me introduce you to our co-hosts, Vaughn Johnson, Doug Bowers, and Carl Walsh.
If you want to start or build or expand your business, learn from experts who have been where you want to be. Tune in to The Oval Table.
Today's guest is a gentleman that I've known for some years now, Robert Simon. He's a restaurateur and one of the best that I have seen in my experience. Robert has had restaurants in Napa. He's had two in Pasadena. He has one, Bistro 45, that I attend on a regular basis, pre-COVID, of course, and it's one of the first stops that I'm going to make as soon as all is well. But here's the thing about Robert. He's been in the business for 51 years. His restaurant has operated in different ways through this whole COVID experience. And it's because he's made some pivots that are very, very impressive. He got creative. He's a very creative man. And Robert, I'm just looking forward to getting back to one of your wine pairing dinners again and bringing friends, which I have often done. First of all, welcome to the table, Robert. We're so glad to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to reading Doug's book.
There we go. Thank you. You're referring to We Are Alpha Dogs, which is a great, quick read, folks. One airplane flight, and you'll have it read. No problem. Now, Robert, Bistro 45, that's your current establishment in Pasadena. How long has that been open?
31 years.
31 years.
Yep.
And if I'm not mistaken, it is actually, the facility was actually at some point a house. Am I correct?
No, originally it was built as doctor's offices.
A doctor's office, okay.
1939, and then it was a restaurant from 1977 until 1990 when we took it over.
I see. Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the pivots that you made during the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about that? Some things that you ended up doing differently than normally.
Well, we have a team of people at the restaurant that, as you are aware, has become our extended family. I have a wife and two children, but the people at the restaurant, there's a busboy that's worked with me, not for me, for the past 39 years. We had a previous restaurant in Old Pasadena to that, which he helped open back in 1983. So there's another gentleman who works with us as a porter for 40 years. We cannot sever any portion of that relationship just because times get tough and it's very difficult to run your business. So we had to reimagine and we had to rethink our position as to how, in any manner, shape, or form, we could safely build, maintain revenue stream. So that was necessity being the mother of invention, which is a great old saying. And the people who wanted to work never missed a paycheck. The people who wanted to be at the restaurant, were masked. They were double masked. This was before there were vaccinations. And we all came in and we worked closely together to turn out different forms of our product that people had a need for. I mean, you asked me before we went on the air about selling meat, which of course that would be much more difficult now considering what we've seen in the escalation of pricing. But when people would come curbside to the restaurant to pick up food to go, which everybody who wanted to survive was doing, we also created an on-street market. So people could buy produce, people could buy meat, people could buy fish, people could buy specialty goods. Because going to the market at the time not only was kind of a precarious position to put yourself into, but you'd often find empty shelves. So it was the solution to a lot of things. And it certainly did not put meat on our bone, as it were, because the bottom line was a long ways away. But at least it gave us some cash flow, and it put us in the public eye as being offering a service that they might want to avail themselves of.
Now, you continued, at least through most of the pandemic and the restrictions put on restaurants, you continued your wine pairing dinners and normal dinners. How were you able to achieve that?
Well, we have relationships. You mentioned having restaurants in Napa. We had a restaurant in Calistoga. We had a restaurant in St. Helena. We have relationships in Sonoma, in San Ynez, in Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo, going all the way back more than 3 decades. So when the time came, we all were in the same boat together. And that is, we had to link arms. They wanted to sell wine. They wanted to market wine, but they couldn't get out in the marketplace to do it. So Bistro 45 has become a good venue as a marketing mouthpiece, as if you will, for them. So we have partnerships that they will give us wine at a very advantageous price. So we can price a dinner at a very advantageous price to a customer. When that dinner comes, we're able to market wine for them at almost no markup for us. We don't make anything on, just charge sales tax to stay legal. So it's a win-win-win. And the customers, we don't even call it that. It's the patrons of the restaurant, the friends of the restaurant, recognize that it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the winery, it's a win for the restaurant, and it's definitely a win for the consumer because they can come to a great 5-course, 6-wine dinner that's done with a lot of care to match those wines to those courses. And then if they want to purchase some wine afterwards, they can at a great wholesale-oriented price, and they feel good about it all the way around. And a lot of them come back on their own to regular dinners or entertaining their friends, which is exactly what we're geared for.
Right. I can certainly attest to the fact that when I walk through your doors, I feel like I'm a guest. I don't feel like I'm a customer or anything. I just feel I'm at home, visiting a friend's home.
Well, we mentioned together, Carl, that hospitality is what our industry is called. And Doug had some curiosity about what it means to, quote, be a restaurateur, because you're dealing with the public on a large scale, hopefully, and you're dealing with the people that work with you. And that creates a whole different dynamic, and it changes. It could change hour to hour, certainly day to day, week to week, month to month, et cetera. And you have to be there for both sets of people consistently, without wavering, to let them know that you're here for them, whatever the definition of that means. And you mentioned something about, waiting until the clouds had passed and things were safe. We're, not out of the woods yet, but we're certainly well into the vaccination era, and all of our staff is double vaccinated. I'm triple vaccinated. We wear masks around the restaurant still. to protect everybody. And like we're doing a wine dinner this Thursday and this Friday back to back. It's been sold out. They've been sold out for 3 or 4 weeks now. There will be over 80 people on each night, over 160 people we will be doing on a 5-course dinner 2 nights in a row. And the winery has been phenomenal. They're out of Oregon, and they're phenomenal in backing us up.
So how do you get, I know at some of your wine pairing dinners and some of the wines that you have on your regular menu, I've attended there when you've had the owners, or at least family of wineries throughout Europe, from France to Italy. How do you make those contacts? How does that happen? How do you bring that to us here in Pasadena?
Those are relationships with the importer and also someone who might be brokering those wines.
Mm-hmm.
And we realized, especially during pandemic, that no one could travel. So we brought wines from Portugal, France, all over Italy, Austria, Germany, to the restaurant. And people had a chance to feel, at least for a couple of 2 or 3 hours, that they had traveled somewhere. At least they, with their palate, had traveled somewhere. And then if they wanted to take some home, they could revisit that. And we could not do any of this without those relationships. But those people would not be partnering with us if they didn't see what you've been commenting about, which I'm very proud of, that each meal is entirely different. We never repeat a course from a previous. Each course is matched particularly to 1 or 2 wines at the same time. And then the service pattern to get it all out promptly and get it all out so it looks, tastes, and feels like it should. We are a sustainable and organically inspired restaurant, and we want people to sense that something different is going on when they come to Bistro 45. It's not ever a mass-produced event. It doesn't mean it would ever be that way if it was a corporate event for 50 people for dinner or a wine dinner for 80 people. It should feel singular, and that's a very challenging task.
And that's something that the whole staff manages to portray during the evening. How did you get them on board with your vision? Or was it your hiring? Did you hire people that you felt could do this?
I think you hit the nail right on the head. I probably consider myself an alpha dog as well. And I have a very specific vision of the kind of feeling. It's not that tangible from nuts and bolts, but the feeling that I want a customer and therefore the entire staff to have when they're coming and being at the restaurant and when they go away from the restaurant. And that is that they're part of something. We're not separate from them. We're all in this together. And the pandemic just really emphasized that whole notion. And it's not party line. Yes, hiring and looking at the people who come through your door and doing a quick evaluation. You kind of become a psychologist after, decades of being in the restaurant business. And you can tell if somebody, you guys must feel the same way. The world is separated very clearly into 2 different castes of people. We call it people who get it and people who don't. And it's really that simple for your staff. The staff that cares, they care because of you can see how they treat each other and how they treat people that they have relationships with. They're going to bring that with them, whether they're working or whether they're out playing at the beach. And the best of the best over the time that we've been open, we're lucky enough to be able to sift through. And then if we find the right raw material, we'll take all the time in the world to get them to understand, where to put a fork or a knife for a certain course. That's the easy part.
Yeah, I'd like to leave set the restaurant aside for a second and talk about some of your managerial philosophies, which are oddly enough the same as ours, in the sense that we start off with a focus on people right from the get-go. We focus on the people. And many of the people we've interviewed, their first step when coming into a business is to focus on the people. So you've said some things, for example, that the people at the restaurant are my extended family. And you made a very sharp point of illustrating that they work with me, not for me. And we really think that that is an important distinction, that if you have a team and the team is out there getting the job done and the team is a part of something larger than themselves, then they're going to function at a much different, much more informed level. They're going to treat the restaurant as something that they have ownership in. And ownership isn't just a capital ownership. It's an ownership that we're producing a product and we want that product to stand out in the marketplace. And we want to always be producing that kind of level of vision. And that, I think that makes a significant difference in how you run a business. Another comment you had was you talked about patrons of the restaurant. In a lot of these how to do it internet shows, they're talking about patrons, that you can join my Patreon and you can make contributions to my site so that I can buy better equipment and do more of these carpenter shows or shipping shows or whatever that particular person happens to do. And so your comment is much the same, that you view the people that come to the restaurant as Patreons. These are people that we want to have back, we want to do well by, and we want them to thoroughly enjoy their experience. And that is a lot different than the concept that I've had in a lot of restaurants of, here's your stuff, hurry up, move on. We need the table turned over. And that doesn't seem to be your impression or your way of doing things, or your staff's way of doing things for that matter. And you've also said that hospitality is what our industry is called, but dealing with people is a different thing, and dealing with not only the employees of the business, but also the customers of the business. That extended hospitality is a two-edged sword. It's two different things, dealing with people inside and the people that just come to the business. But it's an important aspect of how you run your business. We want customers and staff to feel that they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And we maintain that if you're going to run a really high-quality business, that's exactly what you have to do. You have to create an environment where everybody has an ownership interest in how it comes out, and everybody takes that ownership interest seriously and works to protect that ownership interest and make sure that that's, in essence, what is going on each and every day. And if somebody on the team slips a little bit, has a bad night or whatever, that they're there to help them overcome that. And then, oddly enough, you also said people who get it and the people who don't. And the people who get it are the people that work here. The people that don't get it are the people that don't. And I think that is also an interesting concept, that you're out there selecting the people first, because where the knife and the fork go is a minor problem. But finding the right people is really the key to your operation. Does that kind of summarize what your thinking is?
Well, guys, in our industry, it's changed so much. When we first opened a restaurant in 1983, I opened it with my father, and we priced everything on the menu, much to my chagrin, at that time at under $10 per entree, $9.95 probably. And the reason why is because we wanted to not let anybody feel intimidated by price because of what we were doing, which was kind of revolutionary at the time, bringing French and Asian inspired cuisine to Pasadena that had nothing of the kind prior to that, and bringing not one, but two different acclaimed chefs with us to help create that environment that ended up being open 7 days, 7 nights a week, lunch and dinner. And over the 7 years of its existence, we probably saw a profit in maybe 2.5 of those years, even though we were running on almost 100% capacity. And my father and I locked horns about that because costs, of course, started to go up. And therefore, our cost of doing business went along with it. But in those days, if you were successful, you could do anywhere from 10 to 12% bottom line. And if you really pushed the envelope on gross revenue, you could return somewhere around 20% at the end of the day or at the end of the year. When we shifted to Bistro 45 in 1990, after we had sold the other operation, margins were down to about 6 to 7%. As we came to approach the pandemic, we had not seen black ink for 2 or 3 years for various reasons, just because of costs going up and not necessarily being able to raise prices accordingly. Inflation wasn't part of our economy. So if you're thinking about the idea, as many do, that you can reward the people financially who are working with you, and that notion has reoccurred to many, many employers these days as they're looking at the paucity of the labor market and who and what is out there and available and what it will cost you to get them. So you have to be able to put a package together for them of benefits, maybe profit sharing, 401k, whatever it is. In our industry, that's always been really, really, really difficult unless you're a corporation with multiples, franchises, whatever, and you're doing tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So you have to create another way to incentivize people. And that is the challenge of management. And that is the challenge of being, quote, an alpha dog. When you don't really have pieces of the pie you can carve out for people financially, what do you do? Now, how many times a day, week, month can you ask somebody sincerely how their family is? How's everyone feeling? How are the graduations going? How is college going? Whatever those things are. We talk about those things in passing all the time anyway. But there'll come a time when the tenor of that doesn't ring true. After a while, it becomes kind of hackneyed. So what really comes to mind to me, being that alpha person, and Carl, you've seen it again and again, is I don't expect anybody in the restaurant to do anything with me that I wouldn't do myself. And because I've been around it so long, and I've worked in the back of the house, in the front of the house, and designed menus on almost a daily basis with the chefs, there's nothing they know that I wouldn't do to back them up. We just, with very little reserves still after the pandemic, I had to buy them 2 new ovens. How are you going to cook without great ovens? It cost money that I didn't have. But they're so grateful. They know that I understand the difficulty of having to try to fix an oven once a month or once every 2 weeks. So they're sitting there with 2 brand new ovens right now. But that's not it only. It's how you speak about what you do, how you communicate about what you do, and how you show them by example that there's nothing in the restaurant, whether it's bussing a table, picking up something off the floor, cleaning something, whatever it is. I don't expect, nor would I ever think, that other people doing what I do would do what I do the way that I do it. But this is the only way I know how to create that sense of fealty and that sense of being part of something that's providing a livelihood for themselves and their families on a regular basis, and understanding that that has value to help to create that, maintain that, and grow that company. That's the elusive target. And I think, Doug, that's what you were alluding to.
And I can say that Robert does, in fact, walk the walk. He doesn't just talk the talk. When we have dinner there, he's going around pouring wine right along with his staff. He's right there with them. There have been several times where I've walked in the door and he hands us a glass of champagne, just on the house, just welcome to our home. And most of the people that I like to do business with, and I hope our listeners will grasp that, if you know the owner, if you have a relationship with the owner, operator, that the loyalty factor goes way up. I will not go to another cleaners than the one I go to because I know the whole family. I watch the kids grow up. I go to a pharmacy that costs me a little more money than I have to, but it's because I know the owner. It's because I have that relationship. And certainly with Bistro 45, it's exactly the same thing. And it works, Robert. It works. It's not just providing a great product. More importantly, it's the relationships. That's what makes a business work.
And by the way, Doug, at this point, just because you guys were interested, our margins are between 2 and 3%.
So we're not getting rich quick in this operation, but we are providing a quality service, and you are taking care of your people within those cost factors.
Right.
I think one way management, and I am repeatedly disappointed with management that adopts an opinion that my people do something I don't. And I think that is the wrong way of doing things. And in your case, you said, I expect no one to do something I would not do myself. And I think that is really somewhat the gold standard for management, that you have to be willing to do what needs to be done in a situation. You can't refer to somebody else all the time, but you need to be able to sit there and do even some of the most mundane tasks just to show that you're on the same team as they are.
You got to be the real deal. If you're just showing, it's going to be apparent. And if you're actually doing it because you're part of it, you're not only initiating it, but you're following through. And it's basically being a promise keeper. It's what my father was. It's what I've always wanted to be with my kids, as someone who's true to their word, who keeps their promise. And I tell them all the time, I'm here for you. And that means you got to be there. You got to show up. And when you show up, you got to show up, with your big boy pants on.
I think that is a hard standard to live up to, but I think it's the only standard that management can live up to. That everything else is not really that important. That you have to say, I'm there with you, and I'm going to do it with you, and make it happen with you.
And I'll add one thing that is the only way I can keep doing this at this point in time. I'm actually 25% retired at 67. I can't be more than that because I have to be present. But 1 week a month, my wife and I take off and go somewhere. It keeps our relationship alive. It keeps me alive. And during that time, because like you and I and Carl right now are discussing a 3-way conversation, we can, with technology, communicate with the restaurant through the back door of the reservation system and see everybody who's coming in. And we're about 90% reservations, not very many walk-ins. And we know probably 70% of the people who come into the restaurant. So to be able to follow through on the back door with our staff, not only is that a godsend, but the fact that that staff at this point in time buys in so much to what we are doing, to the point that they enjoy the fact that they can run the restaurant without my being there and come back with a 5-star Yelp review or come back with customer comments to me telling me how great their experience was. And we laugh because I actually tell them that means you don't need me after all. And the same thing goes for the customers. But underlying that is that you want to make sure that you're there with the proper handshake or embrace of a hug at the right time, enough so that the customer feels that it's still your imprint to make it what they signed on for. The patron, as you call it, has signed on at Bistro 45 to get something more than a casual fly-by-night, maybe franchised restaurant where, as you said, you're just coming to get your basic meal, drop down your money, and walk out the door. And you'd be lucky if you got anything more than that.
The leader of our team of the 7 dogs is Big Dog. And Big Dog's responsibility is to be the keeper of the flame. In other words, we have a standard, and to keep indicating how important that standard is. And you've just illustrated, without knowing it, exactly what the Big Dog is supposed to do, is to be out there pushing the standard, making sure that everybody agrees with it, and helping everybody live up to it. Another thing I would like to point out, certainly to listeners, is that when you're looking at a business like this, and you have to realize that they have costs, they have a lot of expenses that you may not see when you walk into it, that the highest cost to you as the customer is that they are no longer there. And in order to make sure that they're there, then you have to perhaps pay a little bit more for things, and pay a little bit more often for things, because you want to keep them in business. So you have to be a patron of that restaurant, of that business, in order to be sure that they continue to stay there for you, because you will really notice them when they're gone. And I think that's an important aspect for our listeners to understand.
Well, see, you're just, again, climbing on the separation of those who get it and those who don't. And I couldn't agree with you more. And all of us have our favorite dry cleaner or our favorite dentist or whatever you're talking about in terms of someone's business. And if we not only go and help nurture that business, but we refer other people to that business, that helps that business thrive, that business is going to stay around. And if not, then we might lose it, especially during something like what we've been through over the last 2 years.
Yes, there are those who get it, those who don't. You certainly are one of those people who do. But in the beginning, did you have any mentors? Did you have any models that you went, I like what that person does, and I can do something like that, only my own way? Did you have anything like that?
So there were 3. It's very simple. I was in Berkeley in the 70s, and I worked at Chez Panisse for a while. So in terms of cuisine, Alice Waters was without question the influence in terms of food and understanding what it meant to source something and get the difference between the highest quality and whatever came after. The other person was a guy named, he's still around, both of them are, Narcy David. He also, for a long time, was a radio personality in the Bay Area in San Francisco. But he created a restaurant that was iconic in Kensington, adjacent to Berkeley. And it was the very first to do a prefix menu, akin to what we do, with or without wine pairing. And his way of going about his business not just was sourcing at the highest level, but also to impart to the staff that they were part of creating something special, creating something valuable, and that each of one of them had great value to him. And I was going to school and working for him part-time, and he would take me on buying trips to Napa. And that's when I first realized the importance of the marriage of wine and spirit and other beverages with food. But also, these people would welcome him when we would go to Sacramento to buy port, when we would go to Napa to buy wine, as if he were a brother in arms. And it was remarkable. And he, to this day, I could call him and ask him a question, and he'd answer me with a laugh and a lilt to his voice. And I could feel his warmth, just talking about him. He's just a remarkable person who truly showed me by example what hospitality meant. And the last one was my dad. He was in the plastics industry. He took a small company public. It's a far, far cry from the restaurant world. And when he came to me and he said, after he had seen me be serious about this industry for a long time, I'd like to partner with you, and I'll put up the money, which I had none. and you put up the expertise, which he had none, and he had financial. I didn't have any idea what a P&L meant, and at that point in my life, at 29 years old, learned a whole lot from him about running a business, to the point where I can see those numbers. I can see where bottom line might or might not be going over the course of even a day or a week now, without even having the numbers crunched in front of me. But that came from my dad.
We think the highest judgment of a manager is when he has left the business and he's perhaps at a restaurant having breakfast, and one of his former employees who worked with him is sitting on the other side of the restaurant with his or her grandchildren. And she comes over to you at the table and says, "Kids, I worked with this man for 20 years, and it's the proudest years of my working life." And I think you're probably the epitome of that answer.
Well, Doug, I think that you're very generous, and I really appreciate that. But the most humbling thing I think that's happened besides the pandemic over the last year and a half is somebody came in the restaurant and they were celebrating with a group of 6 or 7 of their family. And there's a young man who probably was 30 years old. And she said to him in front of me, she said, "Robert, come over here. I want to tell you something." And she points to her son. And she said, I think his name was Michael. "Michael, you don't remember this man. And you may not remember this restaurant. Because the last time you were here for your baptism lunch 30 years ago." That was incredible.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well,
It's the customer's statement back to you.
I hate to bring this to an end, but we are out of time. And before we go, I just want to mention how anyone who's in the Pasadena area or passing through can make a reservation at Bistro 45. First of all, you can do it right online at bistro45.com, or you can always call their reservation line, which is 626-795-2478. That is Bistro 45. Get on their mailing list. Find out about the wine pairing dinners. Believe me, they are an experience and at a cost you simply will not find anywhere else. I'm a big fan of Robert Simon and Bistro 45.
I'm looking forward to the day when Carl delivers on his promise to get me one of those wine dinners.
Oh, you're there, buddy. You're there.
All right, David, Doug, Carl, thank you so much. You guys stay healthy and safe.
Well, I suppose there's several points that Robert touched on, and did more than touch on, that come out of our principles, certainly. First of all, being where your customer is, working with your vendors, and developing and taking care of your employees. He embodies those principles throughout. Everything he does is geared towards creating a culture within his business that extends not just to the people within the business, but to the customer as well. The customer is included in that culture, so that when they walk into that establishment, it's an experience. It's not a burger joint. It's an experience that he offers. And that's through this culture that he has created. And one of the things that we didn't get to that I would love to get an answer on, and maybe we will sometime in the future, is these wine pairing dinners. He'll do a particular menu twice because he can't take all the people in one night that want to be there. So that's 80 people per night. And it's 5 courses. And think about this for just a second and how good that team has to be. That's 5 courses, 80 times. So first course comes out to 80 people all at the same time. Boom. Course number 2 comes out to 80 people all at the same time. Boom. That is a well-oiled machine, and you never, ever feel like your sheep being pushed around in the bin. It's a friendly family atmosphere, and they're getting a hell of a job done. Doug, what do you got?
Well, speaking about that point, the dishes he's preparing for each of those 5 items is very specific to the wine that is being highlighted. And he has the vintner or somebody in the vintner's family coming down and helping to discuss the wine. So those dishes are not just knockout dishes. They're not just common dishes. They're not a side of corn. They're very specific, and they take a high degree of skill to be able to produce those. So it's one thing to say I'm doing my common thing 80 times. It's another thing to say I'm doing something special 80 times 5. So that's a logistical problem situation. One of the things that Carl was alluding to is about the general environment there. Here's someone who's been in the restaurant industry for 60 or so years. He was with his dad. He's been in a variety of restaurants, which they tend to do. And he has a living, breathing partnership with his vendors. Now, it's not a legal partnership. It's not a financial partnership, but it's I make a call, I need something, you respond type of call. And it's also comes from the vendor that we have an excess of something, or we have something special here. Can you use it in your menu? Or can you use it in your operation? And we think, especially in these times, that reliance on vendor partnerships is extremely important. And understanding what the vendor's problems are and how the vendor can or cannot deliver on what you normally expect that they would.
One thing, Doug, to add on to that is all of the seafood that he serves, and he always has a seafood course there. He insists, and think about this with his vendors, he insists that whatever's on your plate was alive and in the ocean yesterday. Think about that relationship with the vendor, making sure they've planned this thing out weeks in advance, saying, this is what we're going to have. We're going to have scallops, and I want them alive and in the ocean the day before we serve it.
I mean, think of the logistical problems of doing that, not only on the part of the vendor, but on the part of the restaurant staff. And the menu didn't get printed up 5 weeks ago. I mean, the menu printed up is now. And so the vendor's providing of a part is now. And how flexible and how competent everyone has to be in that chain. I think that's an important thing to reconcile. That in your business, you also have that chain. And you need to be looking at that chain a little bit more seriously than we have in the past, and how important that chain is. Another aspect of Robert's action or activities there that I think is important is his devotion to his staff. He lovingly expresses how the fact that some of them are multi-generational, many of them have been with him for years, some of them were with him at another restaurant he had, and so he's carried these people with him at these various places. And that implies 2 things going on. One is that he's worth following to another location. He's worth continuing to be involved in. But the other thing is that the employee is worth having. And so you have the dichotomy of those 2 aspects, which are important aspects of critical factor number 4 is to enrich and reward employees. And to the extent possible, that's what he does. He tries to focus that, even if it costs him profits, even if the profit margins are razor thin, he still wants to take care of those employees. And we have a great example of someone who's focused on that in a small business environment, because his place isn't all that large and he only has the one location. So I think those are 2 important factors that he illustrates.
Also, the way he focuses on hiring the right people. I can teach a guy where to place the fork, but I can't teach him to be the kind of person that I want in my establishment. That needs to walk through the door.
I talked to a friend of mine about Robert. I mentioned that we had talked to him, and he says, "Oh, I've been there a number of times. It's a great experience."
If you are looking for a competitive advantage, I encourage you to look at the words you use when you promote, speak, and sell. I can help. Talk to me. Fripp.com.
No podcast like ours would be possible without the help of some talented people behind the scenes. We would like to thank Audavita Studios and their director of podcast production, Sean Hedinger, recording engineer David Rosenblad, staging and show production David Wolf, social media Jay Spang, artist Marsha Carrington, and for our transcriber, Jamie Karras. We all hope you have a productive and inspirational week. I'm Rishi Katz, and we will see you next time here at the Oval Table.